Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Good morning. You did it. A few minutes to get logged on here. We have a quarantine just starting this week, so my little assistant is with us today. And I'm hearing that the chairman is going to be just a couple more minutes, which is totally fine. I will go ahead and introduce myself and start with a word about NATHPO. Valerie Grusing, Executive Director, National Association of Tribal Historic Preservation Officers, NATHPO, based in the Washington, D.C. area. This is my home office in Silver Spring, Maryland, the ancestral homeland of the Piscataway and the Nacotchtank, the Anacostan peoples. I myself am descended from colonizers, and so remain eternally grateful for the opportunity to do this work and to be here with you. Someone please flag for me if when the chairman shows up. Senator Heinrich, welcome. It is a delight and an honor to have you here with us today. Hey, here he is. Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning, thank you.
Welcome, welcome. We are really excited to not just have you here, but to hear directly from you about these bills today. We've been talking about these at our events for quite a while, and so to see progress on them and to be able to talk to you about them is really exciting. Our members and prospective members and constituents, tribal historic preservation officers, and those who do the work without the recognition, and tribal culture resources work are on the front lines of what the subject of these bills are, protecting Native places. And the current framework, largely the National Historic Preservation Act, as you know, does not actually provide strong protection for sacred places, sacred sites, landscapes, places important for subsistence activities, and all places that are important to Native peoples, which is a lot of places because, as we know, Indian land is everywhere and not necessarily limited to their locations today, specifically tribal land and trust land. So we're excited to hear about the protection that this pair of bills could provide and start to fill some gaps and hopefully not just make things better for tribal historic preservation officers, but for the tribes and sovereign nations that they represent in trying to protect Native places. I'm not sure which of you had intended to go first. I will defer to you on that, but I will introduce you both before we start. Chairman?
I think Senator Heinrich is kind of the protocol I've been taught here. So
Okay.
You're the one with the gavel, Chairman. I'll be happy to defer to you.
No, I already did. I beat you.
All righty. Senator Martin Heinrich is a champion for tribal nations. He serves on both the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee and the Senate Interior Appropriations Committee. He's advocated on behalf of Pueblos and tribes on a wide range of issues and is a staunch defender and protector of tribal sovereignty. We are currently working with him on efforts to make sure that THPOs have the resources, being the funding, that they need to protect and preserve cultural resources and sacred places. And we're not going to talk specifically about the Historic Preservation Enhancement Act today, but that is something that we are also extremely grateful that is getting your energy and attention, and we look forward to continuing to work with you on a way to get funding to THPOs, because if they had the staff to be able to do this work at a basic level, then that's what we need. And Chairman Grijalva, as chairman of the Committee on Natural Resources, Chairman Raúl Grijalva leads the fight to protect our public lands, advocate for the policy priorities of Indian country. He was elected to Congress in 2002, following years of service on the Tucson Unified School District Governing Board and the Pima County Board of Supervisors. We're grateful for his leadership also in making sure that tribal nations have the resources they need to preserve and protect cultural resources and native places. Take it away, Senator.
Thank you, Valerie, and good morning, everyone. It's really an honor to speak with all of the tribal leaders and tribal historic preservation officers who are joining this call today. And I really want to thank the National Association of Tribal Historic Preservation Officers and the National Congress of American Indians for helping to pull all these folks together and organize these outreach sessions. As many of you are aware, I've been working really closely with Representative Grijalva, the chair of the House Natural Resources Committee, on two bills that we're planning to introduce soon. And I really appreciate all of you joining the two of us and our staff today to provide us with the feedback and ask important questions as we work to get them both ready for introduction. And thank you to those of you who've been providing us with essential feedback and guidance up to this point. Our first bill, the Tribal Cultural Areas System Act, is based on the recognition that so many of our federally managed public lands are also the ancestral homelands of tribal nations. Tribes across Indian country have ancestral sites and historical ecological knowledge and ongoing cultural practices on our federal public lands. It's really long overdue for us to recognize that these historic ties and sacred connections to the landscapes themselves. And it's long past time to recognize that tribal nations should be playing an integral role in the management of these tribal cultural areas. I want to be clear that land management agencies conducting tribal consultation just to check a box is simply not acceptable in today's era. Our bill would create a tribal cultural areas system specifically tailored to protect tribal cultural resources, a type of designation that doesn't exist today. Designated tribal cultural areas within this system would be managed to protect the cultural values while allowing for traditional cultural uses. Our bill would also empower tribal nations to participate in management decisions with land management agencies, where they can share traditional knowledge and ensure that cultural resources are being properly protected. We saw something akin to this in the Obama administration's original monument designation for Bears Ears National Monument. The original proclamation for Bears Ears included the establishment of the Bears Ears Commission with representatives from tribes affiliated with the monument's cultural resources and landscapes. I'm convinced that providing tribes with a real seat at the table is key to long-term protection of sacred places like Bears Ears or Chaco Canyon in my home state and the Badger Tooth Medicine in Montana. Our second bill, the Advancing Tribal Parity on Public Lands Act, would correct some long-running holes in laws governing the sale and disposal of federally managed public lands. It would finally put sovereign tribal nations on a more equal footing with state and local governments in acquiring public lands. And it would require the U.S. Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management to provide tribal nations with historic connections to land with the first opportunity to reacquire lands if they are ever sold. It would require federal land managers to consider the presence of cultural sites and the fulfillment of treaty obligations in their criteria for land acquisition. Our bill would also prohibit the sale of public lands that contain tribal cultural sites, except to an affiliated tribe. And it would repeal antiquated laws that allow states to acquire lands within reservations without the agreement of affected tribal governments. And finally, we would ensure tribal representation on public land advisory boards by setting a statutory requirement that they include at least one tribal representative. There's a lot in each of these bills that have come directly from our staff's engagement with tribal nations, but I want to be sure that we are listening closely to your feedback today and consulting with tribal nations as we move forward with the introduction of both of these bills. And I encourage all of you to stay engaged with our teams throughout the legislative process in both the House and Senate. Please don't hesitate to work with Maya Herman on my staff, who you're also going to hear from today. And thank you again for joining Chair Grijalva and myself for today's session. And with that, I'm looking forward to hearing the chairman.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Valerie, for pulling this together, and to the association. Thank you very much. Your input, your expertise, your willingness to work with committee staff and going forward on this legislation has been essential, and that council is needed now, and that's why we're here to continue that conversation as we move these pieces of legislation forward. It's needed now, your council, and it's going to be needed going forward. And just a note that was made by Valerie at the beginning, that fundamental reform to the Historic Preservation Act is an urgency as well, and to codify into law what the presence of indigenous communities, tribes, and will have going forward and need to have codified into law, that role and the importance of that presence, both on a historical level and in terms of consultation. So looking forward to continuing that and moving that as quickly as we can. The two bills today, my good friend and very, very effective member of the Resources Committee when he was part of the working class in those days, and now has become a leading partner and a very effective partner in dealing with the issues in Indian country. And my friend Senator Heinrich and from New Mexico, and I really proud to join with him in this effort as well. And thanking our respective staffs for their time to this legislation. The senator outlined the bills. In essence, that's what the intent of the legislation is. The parity on public lands I think is important because it'll provide tribal governments with the first consideration with the use of disposing of federal lands. And this bill comes from the spirit of the National Congress of American Indians resolution that with the objective to get rid of outdated land laws and that have historically excluded Indian country from participating and only included states and counties. And I think that this is an important precedent, an important step in that direction. The tribal cultural area system builds on work that's already been done, but it creates entirely new management systems explicitly to protect cultural resources and sacred sites. I think those are key to this, and I intend to continue this conversation that we're having today and continue with the staff. Let us know what could make these bills better, what would make them stronger, what is there additional prescriptive language that has to be in it. I want to ensure that they incorporated traditional ecological knowledge that's practical and legal knowledge, and you that have the experience can help us with that. And we want to build a record and begin with these conversations to ensure that the protection of cultural resources and the elevation of tribal land management receives the attention that it really deserves. So with that, and to all of you, thank you very much. Senator, appreciate all the work of you and your staff, and look forward to the conversation that you're going to have with staff, and look forward to moving these pieces of legislation. With that, let me give it back to you. And again, thank everybody that has taken of their valuable time to be here with us. Very much appreciated.
Thank you so much, Senator and Mr. Chairman. Will we have you for a few more minutes, or do we need to say farewell?
I'm going to have to pop off here in a couple of minutes, but I think Maya Herman should be on the call
See my
And we look forward to continuing this partnership with all of you. And I'm very grateful to Chairman Grijalva and his staff, who have been fantastic to work with on this. And we're looking forward to really extending that kind of approach to all of your tribal historic preservation officers who can make this even better.
Valerie and Henry that's been leading this effort from the Resources Committee is also, most of you have talked and met with him, is also on the call as well. So when I sign off, I will be left in good hands.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, we will look forward to having you for a few more minutes. And then when you sign off, we will say farewell for now. And thank you again for your time today, for coming to talk to us directly about these bills. And thank you for your efforts and all that you do with regard to these and many other things. I appreciated the hearing last week on your proposed bill related to the Mining Act. And as I mentioned, the Historic Preservation Enhancement Act, a lot of interrelated issues that are all critically important to our audience today. Henry and Maya, it's great to have you as always. This session might be a little bit of a repeat and hopefully an update from the conference session that we had on these bills as well. So if folks have any of the same questions or any different questions, we are here to have a dialogue about these proposed bills. And so I have some potential questions if needed to keep discussion going, but first I'd like to ask if there are any tribal leaders who are with us today who would like to have first priority for any questions or comments on what you heard. Governor Randall Vicente, are you able to unmute? Welcome, sir.
Good morning, Senator Heinrich and Chairman Raúl and staff and everybody. Greetings from the Pueblo of Acoma. Glad to be online and really glad to hear about, Senator Heinrich's supporting and moving two bills. Just need to know when it gets to that point in time with what the bill numbers will be, and so we can continue support. I do have a historic preservation team here at Acoma, and also some interest in other areas. As you mentioned earlier, Senator Heinrich, Bears Ears, lands in between Chaco Canyon, Mesa Verde, and also you mentioned about the sale of public lands and tribal cultural sites being recognized. Really appreciate those comments and your support in that. Maybe before you head back to DC, I can meet up with you. I do have some things I need to bring forward to your office. If not, I can meet you in DC probably the middle of June. I will be visiting DC along with other legislators. But thank you for this time. Really appreciate this moment. Thank you, Senator Heinrich and Raúl. Thank you, Valerie.
Thank you for that. Any response from the chairman? And if not, we can go to the next raised hand. I see Mr. Atterbury from the Carib Tribe.
Yes, I'm Buster Atterbury and chairman for the Karuk Tribe. Yootwa, thank you, Chairman Raúl and Senator Heinrich for your time. Appreciate it. So the Karuk Tribe is located in the very northern part of California. Say about 40 miles from the Oregon border as the crow flies. Very forested area. The Karuk Tribe has 3 districts spanning 2 counties within about 150 miles up and down the Klamath River. Over 100 years ago, the culture for the Karuk Tribe as far as caring for our forests was outlawed, and that was using fire to reduce the fuels that we had out there. That's part of the mismanagement. The Kuruk tribe council has made a resolution. We have filed for to look into co-management of our forests, so we can combine tribal ecological knowledge with modern science. We have a comprehensive climate adaptation plan that we developed 10 years ago when we knew this was coming. Now Happy Camp, the town of Happy Camp is a headquarters for the Kuruk tribe, and we lost half the town to the Slater fire in 2020. And we are currently very excited about the fact that the federal government, and for us, the Forest Service out here, we are a reservationless tribe, so the lands that surround our Aboriginal territory are Forest Service lands. We have a lands transfer process that's in legislation, and we hope to, with co-management, be able to get infrastructure funding so we can bring back the indigenous ways of using fire to reduce the fuels. As everybody knows, it's changed over the years, the 100+ years where those indigenous methods were used to reduce those fuels were outlawed. Obviously, though in climate change and the tremendous growth of the underbrush out in our forests, we have to adapt. We have to change our ways. So our Department of Natural Resources has done a TREX training program. We were one of the first ones in the country to offer this program to teach other agencies how to use fire to reduce the fuels, the time of the year, right down to the weather report, the time of the day. All those are factors that need training for agencies. So the infrastructure dollars funding that I would be looking for would be for training facilities, either in Happy Camp or Orleans, which is the headquarters for our Department of Natural Resources program. Again, I encourage everybody to look on our website for our climate adaptation plan, and the other one is called our Good Fire Report. And those are all included in our website. Look forward to the bills and advancing tribal parity on Public Lands Act. That's a big one for the Kuruk tribe. Like I said, we're a reservationless tribe, so all of our lands are public or federal Forest Service lands. And the ways that we can work together and combine the science, tribal ecological knowledge, with modern science. We do want to include modern science, and I say that because what was left out of the equation 100 years ago was everybody failed to consult the people who live here, and nobody knows any country better than the people who live here. So that's happening now. We're very excited and happy about that. Again, we will be advocating for funding for training facilities so we can get the management of our forests back to where we're doing some fire prevention methods. Again, I thank you for your time.
Recording in progress.
I would just say thank you, sir. I appreciate your time as well. Thank you for being on today's meeting, and you're hopefully in good hands with Congressman Huffman. We've interacted with his staff and talked to his team about some of the proposals you're bringing forth, and look forward to continuing to work with you and with the Carib tribe on these issues. And appreciate your support today, the conversation today, and please feel free to reach out if you have any feedback, questions, concerns on these two proposals. So look forward to continuing to work together on a variety of pieces.
Thanks, Henry. Thank you, Chairman Atterbury and Governor Randall. Vicente, we appreciate you taking time to come here today and to offer your perspectives. I heard some great key terms and concepts there. I think there's a lot of potential to work with these bills in collaboration with some other administration initiatives, including related to traditional knowledge, sacred sites, and treaty rights. And as I mentioned, there's a lot of interrelationship between these issues. So I think that this is really timely for all those reasons. I don't see any other raised hands. Here we go. C. Andrews, are you able to unmute yourself?
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just want to say good morning. Thank you very much for allowing us to be on this the Zoom. And also, I want to just say hello to everybody else. Great morning this morning. It's not windy here in Arizona, so it's a very, very great morning. But what I wanted to say also is that, I want to say thank you to Chairman Grijalva and Senator Heinrich as well for being on this call and hearing, I guess, what us Native people are calling our ancestral homelands. And like you stated earlier, Native land is everywhere. So we are part of the Bears Ears. I am part of the Bears Ears Commission, along with 4 other tribes. So we are working very hard and looking forward to working with the Bureau of Land Management and also with the U.S. Forest Service. We're constantly having meetings, and we're very much excited to start to work collaboratively with this management plan that that we have established now. So I just want to say thank you everybody that is on the call and supporting this, and I just wanted to state that. So and I thank you very, very much.
Thank you, sir. We're glad you could be here. Are there other tribal leaders on the call who would like to provide comment or ask questions? Mr. Mitchell, are you able to unmute yourself?
Good morning.
Hi.
My name is Mark Mitchell. I am a former governor from the Pueblo of Tesuque, and I'm also the chairman of the All Pueblo Council of Governors here in the state of New Mexico. The Pueblo of Tesuque, last year as governor, we supported this bill. We sent in letters supporting the bill. I think it's a good idea to have a little bit more discussion as to the details and the meat of this legislation. And the reason for that is across our country, all the indigenous peoples are intertwined with either BLM, Forest Service, state, and others. And I think that first and foremost, the TCPs, the traditional cultural places of all the tribes, or some of them are, or most of them are off the current day reservations. And we still practice our religion, so it takes us to these areas. And so it's critically important that how we address these issues, sometimes those traditional ways are not to be shared with the general public, but by the same token, I think that we need to make sure that the general public somewhat understands what's happening. As far as the lands parity bill, my comment, and I'm only speaking on my pueblo. I think last year we were saying, while the intent is good, we were hoping that the ancestral homelands of all indigenous peoples were directly given back to them without having the tribes purchase the lands that are open for disposal. Because some of the tribes, as we heard just earlier, some don't have reservations, some do have reservations, but they're checkerboarded. And I think it's critically important that everyone understands the attempt of making sure that these bills are followed through, and to grasp the idea and understand wholeheartedly that there are issues that may be coming up in the future, but it's a good start. I believe that if we can assist and push our issues as indigenous peoples regarding the land, I've always said this in my discussions, and I've always told the state and some of the federal agencies, you always refer to this area as Indian country. Well, it is Indian country. And I always have to say that prior to contact, Columbus on the East Coast and Coronado's expedition in the Southwest, Native people occupied the area, and we're still here. So one, it is good that we're being recognized. Two, that it's just a process and better understanding of the bills that are being introduced. It's good that this is happening, and so that everybody can understand the process that it'll take. So with that, those are my comments on behalf of my pueblo, Tesuque. However, as the chairman of the All Pueblo Council of Governors, each of the pueblos are unique amongst themselves, and they too would need to make sure that they're heard. And we look forward to working with both Senator Heinrich, who is a champion in our eyes, and Representative Grijalva, Chairman Grijalva as well. And I think that if we can educate ourselves as to the language and what the bill's intents are, we can wholeheartedly move forward with it. So those are my comments, and thank you very much for giving me time to speak.
Thank you, Chairman. Just on behalf of Senator Heinrich, I'll say thank you. He enjoyed seeing you a couple of weeks ago, and we really look forward to continuing these conversations with you and all of the governors. So thank you for joining today and sharing your comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's an honor to have you. Aaron's iPhone has a hand raised.
Good morning, everybody.
Hello.
Thought my computer was having problems this morning. No, I just wanted to comment on a little bit of my chairman's comments. My Aaron Hockaday, Tribal Council member for Kruger Tribe. Now I was on here a couple months ago with you guys, and we're doing some discussions. With this bill, though, we got to make sure that when this bill goes through, because we have a lot of most of our ancestral territories in the public lands, and we, like I said last time, we had some big fires on our ancestral territories and stuff. As of to this day, the Klamath National Forest has not done nothing or have any replant intentions to do anything to our culture up here, like putting back in yew woods and bear grass and hazel sticks for our gathering people. And we've been going to the table with them for months and months, trying to ask questions, and they keep saying that the upper federal government's holding them up. And with this bill, that's when we're talking about our sacred lands and our use of these lands. And if it's not getting down to the bottom, or the bottom's not getting to the top, to me, it's a waste of our time. I mean, I don't want to be mean or anything, because we want to work together, right? It's all about co-management of the forests, co-managing everything back together. We have some real good ideas, but it doesn't seem like in our area we can't get it to the table to get some of these things going. And it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking for us because we can do a lot of things, like our chairman said. We were trying to put the fire back to land and all this stuff, but a lot of our head streams for our spring Chinook and coho salmon are wide open. The water comes out of the ground and has sun clear to the river. Our spawning grounds are completely open, no vegetation because of the fires we had. I mean, things like that, to us, it's an emergency to get these, plantations back together and stuff. And, and these are on public lands, our public lands, the United States public lands, and the United States Forest Service are not doing anything to do anything right now. I mean, 2 years of 2 major big fires. And I just want to let you guys know that, I mean, I like this bill. It's a good bill, but we just need to make sure that it works for everybody. We need to make sure it works on both ends. And thank you for letting me take the time.
Of course, no, thank you for the feedback and the commentary. We certainly hear and share your concerns about some of the difficulties that we've heard about from across the country, where folks have had difficulty kind of engaging with agencies on co-management related issues. I think that's one of the purposes behind why we've tried to pull these 2 pieces of legislation together. In particular, the tribal cultural area system would intentionally designate new lands that would be focused on protecting tribal cultural uses, which would hopefully directly give tribes a seat at the table on a commission to kind of engage directly with the agencies to help support those uses. It's also why our committee held a hearing on tribal co-management of federal lands and waters, and kind of acknowledging some of the issues here, and acknowledging some of the difficulties that folks have faced on the ground. And so we're hopeful that, by continuing to push the agencies, by requesting, their feedback on where funding is needed, where additional authorities are needed, where kind of staff training is needed, and, kind of teaching staff the value of engaging on these issues, that we can hopefully push the ball forward. We recognize that it's a slow and often frustrating process, but, we certainly are hopeful that we can continue to work together and to advance opportunities to address issues like the one you raised. So thank you for being on today and for sharing your feedback.
Thank you, Councilman, for joining us. And thanks for that, Henry. I'm going to ask a question myself while we give folks some time to ponder what other questions or comments they have. And of course, if there are more tribal leaders on, please let us know if you have a question or a comment before we open it up to everyone. Henry, you mentioned the process of designation under the Tribal Cultural Heritage Areas Act. In my former life, I was in the Office of National Marine Sanctuaries at NOAA. And so I love a system of protected areas. I'm also pretty intimately familiar with a lot of the challenges that they pose, in addition to opportunities, among them funding for the agency who may be in charge of the protected area and system, or other managing entity, in this case, ideally tribes, right? Can you talk a little bit about the process of how tribal cultural areas would be designated?
Of course, yeah, happy to share some further information on that. And then Maya, please feel free to hop in if there's pieces that I've missed. But yeah, so, this is one piece that we have thought a lot about and have had conversations about to try and ensure that this process encompasses a range of perspectives from tribal stakeholders who are interested in these sites, but would be very welcome further feedback from folks if there are additional things to consider as we're looking at the process. But as drafted, there are multiple ways where a tribal cultural area system could be designated. The first would be through direct application. So a tribe would have the opportunity to pull together an application to the secretary to have a site recognized as a tribal cultural area. And the second method would be through kind of the agency planning process and through tribal consultation that occurs during the updating of management plans. There would be opportunities to identify these areas. You could also work directly through a member's office or through a senator's office, go directly to representatives to have these sites designated. And ultimately, once if the secretary supports the designation, then that site is managed as a tribal cultural protected area going forward. Or if the secretary chooses not to recognize the area, they have to provide feedback in writing, identifying their concerns and giving an opportunity to update the application. This hopefully would, is an effort to ensure that there are clear reasons that can be addressed or that can be discussed or that can be shared, rather than the kind of typical process where a no is just a no without further explanation. So hopefully that would help alleviate some concerns. And then ultimately, the designation would be occur through Congress. And so Congress would act to move a bill in both chambers that would permanently designate the site and ensure that it is afforded permanent protections for the tribal cultural uses for which it's designated. I don't know, Maya, hopefully that hit the right marks, but I don't know if there's anything else to add there.
I've got nothing. I think you covered all of it. There is a question in the chat about valid existing rights and how they're handled through the legislative process. I don't know if you want to take that, or I'm happy to.
Sure, I can start off. Sorry, I did not have the chat open. I'll pull it up here just so I can see future comments. But so valid existing rights. Yeah, so this will be a point that I think folks are, or that we have heard comment on, and that I think we anticipate hearing further comment on. Valid existing rights is generally a standard protection afforded to uses that occur within a site. However, in the contemplation of designating a tribal cultural area, what we would see is the secretary working with the tribal commission that would be appointed for an area to develop a management plan that would outline kind of how existing uses are considered within the scope of the site, and then would set up a process by which tribal communities would have a really strong say in identifying future new uses that might be contemplated at the site. Unfortunately, a true valid existing right becomes a little bit of a sticky issue for the agencies, just because it gets into kind of the constitutional protections and takings. And so that is kind of a standard for protection there, but we have taken every opportunity to elevate the roles of a tribal commission established for a site and weighing in on the future protection and future uses that could occur within a tribal cultural area in an effort to afford the kind of highest standard of protection to those uses. Maya, I don't know if there's anything else to add there.
Yeah, I think this questioner also mentioned valid existing rights as treaty rights as well. And both bills specifically contain provisions that say that they make no changes to treaty rights or other rights that tribes hold today, and certainly an intention of the tribal cultural areas would be to ensure that those areas are managed in a way that supports the exercise of those treaty rights, and that incompatible new uses in an area would at least face a high bar to approval in those areas, so that those treaty rights could continue to be exercised.
Okay, thank you. And as you were talking, I realized I have a question I feel like I should know the answer to by now, but if I don't, I'm going to ask it. The tribal cultural areas, we're not talking about transferring title to ownership. We're talking about public lands that remain public lands as part of whatever managing agency they're currently managed by, but then they've got an additional designation and layer of protection.
That's right. So this is an approach of bringing more tribal involvement in the management of designated public lands to ensure that tribal interests, the cultural activities, the treaty rights, and other interests of tribes are given a high level of deference in the management of these public lands, but they would remain public. Yes.
Okay, so sort of codifying co-management.
Yeah, that's one way to think of it. And then, of course, just to be clear, that the other bill, the Advancing Tribal Parity bill, deals much more with sales and exchanges and those kinds of transactions that would move land to tribal ownership by giving tribes an equal playing field with states, counties, and municipalities under our existing public lands laws.
Okay, thanks, Maya. I see a question in the chat, but I also see that Feather, you've had your hand raised for a while, so we'll go to you first.
Hi, my name is Gregory Feather Wolfin. I am from the Bear River Tribe. I am one of the council members. So I was reading through like the overview of the slides. So what my question would be is, how would the free clause play into this? Would there be legal challenge or, I guess, practice of
Sorry, I admittedly had a little trouble hearing that. Maya, I don't know if you heard, or if maybe Feather, if you could repeat. Sorry, you were cutting in and out there a little bit.
The audio cut out.
Sorry, yeah, the free exercise clause and how that would play, if that would provide legal challenges for access of Native Americans to practice religious ceremonies on federal lands.
I feel like I'm missing a key word at the beginning of your question.
Oh,
what would ability?
Like free exercise clause or like the religious expression.
Yes, so this again, if I'm misunderstanding the question, please clarify. The Tribal Cultural Areas Bill includes specific protection for religious practices and access for religious practices, temporary closures on public land in accordance with the American Indian Religious Freedom Act. Yes, those practices are certainly protected. I'm hoping that responds to what you were asking.
Yeah, that's kind of I guess my questions being like, I don't know if it's my connection or not. So I have one more question as well. Is so with this, what about like green energy? With my tribe, we're facing, I guess, an influx of windmills, geothermal power plants, and other green energy opportunities. That's really their location would alter or impact our sacred sites, and we've been trying to battle these companies and corporations for some time. And with the U.S., green energy deals and policies, they streamline these green energy plans to have these projects within our ancestral boundaries, which would ultimately impact our sacred sites.
Absolutely. I think this is a great example of exactly the kind of situation that we're looking to address with the Tribal Cultural Areas Establishment Act. Within a tribal cultural area, the Tribal Commission, with representatives from tribes who have a cultural connection to the area, would have a central seat at the table, creating the management plan for the area, helping to decide whether any new uses would be allowed in the area and what those new uses might be. And if the commission, the representatives of affiliated tribes, objects to a new use within the area, they would have a central role in that decision-making process, and the land managers would have to respond directly in writing within a specified time period on why they are considering making a decision in a different direction. And so the goal of these cultural areas is to give tribes with an affiliation with the cultural area a central role in decisions about new uses in that area in the future, including energy development of all sorts.
So what it sounds to me is it provides more mitigation for the tribe. Is that correct?
I would say it provides a pathway for the tribe to play a much greater role in the decision about whether or not to allow a new use. In the end, these are still public lands, and so the final authority on the management remains with the land management agency. But within a tribal cultural area, tribes that participate in the tribal commission would have very strong standing to be involved in management decisions from the very beginning, sort of even before you would get to a point where a particular renewable energy project or otherwise would be planned. By participating in the management plan of the cultural area, that really sets the stage for what uses might be allowed in an area. And at every step of the way, the tribes would really have a direct and central role in making those management decisions and what uses could be allowed.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Maya, for your answer. I'm going to go over to the chat box and go chronologically first from M. V. Nixon. We have a question that relates to something you just mentioned, Maya, with regard to tribes with an interest in the area. How about provisions for non-federally recognized Indigenous people and cultures in this system?
So I can hop in there first. Maya, please let me know if you have additional feedback. At this point, the bill contemplates areas driven by federally recognized tribes. I think that has been a point that has come up and that we are certainly open to further discussion on, but that is the standard that the bill uses at this point in its current draft form. Maya, I don't know if there's anything in addition to add there.
Nope, that covers it.
Okay, thank you. And then from the Pueblo of Zuni Governor's Office, question is, on behalf of the Zuni tribe, we appreciate the avenues identified in both bills. Our question is, will there be any dialogue or interaction with Secretary Holland's Tribal Advisory Committee as these bills are developed and hopefully implemented? Great question.
So I would say that there will not necessarily be an explicit interaction in that, right? I think that we will engage though with the departments, and so whether the departments see fit to engage with the Tribal Advisory Committee or with the White House Tribal Advisory Committee is kind of at their discretion. So we fully support engaging with the department as these bills kind of move forward in the process. We will continue to engage with Secretary Holland and her team to ensure that their feedback and insights are heard as these bills move forward, as we will continue to work with tribal governments and Indigenous peoples across the country to ensure that feedback and updates are made to the bills as appropriate.
Okay. Very good. I see a couple more raised hands, and personally, I'm really wanting to get to Tina's question, so I'm going to do that. This may seem elementary, and you may have mentioned it, but will there be funding tied to these bills? Co-management is also labor intensive for tribes who are already understaffed and not funded. I've alluded to that a couple of different ways myself, and this is it's just everything, right? Tribes need funding for staff to be able to do this work, to be able to handle the thousands of Section 106 review requests they get every year, to be able to do their NAGPRO work, their language work, all the many hats that TIPOs wear. And from the Historic Preservation Fund, they currently have part of one staff member funded. So to be adding to their plates, this is a really critical element. And we realize there's a difference between authorizing bills and appropriating bills. This is something that we're in the throes of discussing with regard to the Historic Preservation Enhancement Act as well. But what can you tell us about the thinking that's gone on behind that question?
I can take this one since my office has been talking with all of you about the Historic Preservation Fund Enhancement Act. These bills do not directly include funding. As you say, they're authorizing bills rather than appropriating bills. But Senator Heinrich is certainly well aware of the need for dramatically increased funding for the TIPOs to support work like this, as well as the work that is already on the plate of the TIPOs. We're working with the Appropriations Committee, which Senator Heinrich sits on. He's a member of the Interior Appropriations Subcommittee that funds the Historic Preservation Fund. So we are working with them to try to make sure that we see an increase in the funding for the TIPOs next year. And then we are also working on legislation to permanently fund and increase funding for the Historic Preservation Fund in the future. So I think we see these bills as part of a constellation of bills addressing cultural protection with tribes, but we very much understand the funding piece of this and how important it is for that to come alongside these authorizing bills.
Thanks,
I would agree with everything Maya said. If I could just hop in real quick, and I appreciate the response there. I think that is also a focus for our committee, as we heard the Historic Preservation Enhancement Act, and we're honored to have Chair Reno Franklin attend from to speak about the Historic Preservation Enhancement Act and to discuss opportunities to continue funding the work of TIPOs. We've been working closely with Representative Ledger Fernandez's office on these issues from New Mexico as well. But the other piece that we've also been looking at is on the issue of co-management, generally engaging with the federal agencies to better identify where there are opportunities to direct funding to tribal governments and to indigenous peoples to carry out this work, whether that be through 638 contracting, through other novel kind of contracting mechanisms to, to the greatest extent practicable to ensure that tribes are receiving the funding to do this work directly rather than having federal agencies, often not successfully do it on their behalf. And so, we are considering as many avenues as possible, and I would say, I think the way that Maya put it hits the nail right on the head, that this is, a constellation of efforts. And although there's not funding tied to this one bill in particular, or these two bills in particular, rather, that there are opportunities that we're looking at across the board to address the funding component alongside a greater level of recognition and participation in these protections.
Okay, thanks for adding on to that. I love that metaphor. Actually, I haven't heard that one before. Constellation of bills. We love it when stars align. So may the force be with us. And I didn't set an end date, end time on this. I'm hoping that Maya, Henry, you can stick around for a few more questions. And then once we start getting close to the end, I'm going to ask this question in advance. Be sure and let us know what exactly you need from our audience before we sign off here, so that we can help you move these along, help you help us. Council Member Aaron, you've had your hand raised for a while. Thank you for your patience.
You just answered one of my questions about funding, so that was good to hear a little bit. But the other part is that the other gentleman before that was talking about public lands, where we have cultural sites and stuff like that, that we need to make sure too that, like I'll say again, we need to make sure that the rangers in these districts, because we belong to 2 different districts in our force, if this bill passes and stuff, that how they're supposed to work with us, because it's a fight. I mean, it's a fight to work with these guys, even though we've been there for thousands of years and, praying in these certain sites for thousands of years. It seems like we should have a little bit of the right to say what goes on there and what's not supposed to be destroyed and what's, supposed to keep intact. I mean, last year during the fires here, we had a ranger that we had a fight with about certain areas that shouldn't be done and taken away and putting fire lines across. And should have been a low intensity backburn instead of a high intensity backburn. I mean, those are some of the things that when these bills come through, that they need to know that that's what we're looking for. Sorry, I repeated myself, but I just heard that gentleman just here for me, and that's what brought this back. So thank you.
Thank you again for the comments. I think we were lucky enough to have Director Sams from the National Park Service attend a committee hearing earlier this year. And he raised a point that I think resonates across the land management agencies, that it's important that we ensure that staff receive the training and education necessary to understand how to engage in tribal co-management, and to really respect the role that traditional ecological knowledge plays in the management of these places. And so we're looking forward to working with him, as well as the other federal land management agencies. I mean, obviously he's the director of the Park Service, but the other federal land management agencies kind of across the board, to identify how to better facilitate co-management relationships on the ground, and to really ensure that tribal input and knowledge are kind of considered and taken fully into account as the agencies continue to engage in land management decisions. So appreciate the feedback there.
Thanks for that. And we have a raised hand from the Pueblo of Zuni Governor's Office. Are you able to unmute? Hello.
My name is Carlton Baca, the Lieutenant Governor for the Zuni tribe. I'm here with Governor Pentia and members of the Zuni Tribal Council. I guess first and foremost, we really appreciate the, as we stated before, the dialogue and our involvement with certain organizations and certain protection areas, such as, of course, Chaco Canyon, the Bears Ears National Monument, our ongoing efforts to protect the Zuni Salt Lake and other associated areas. Usually we find that most of the time, us as tribal leaders are trying to provide avenues for our staff to be able to continue the work. For the most part, they're the continuity for a lot of our programming and a lot of our underlying issues. As tribal leaders, we're given our term, and within that time frame, we're exposed to so many different things. For myself, with the assistance of my cultural leaders, I've been provided additional information which allows me to be able to visit certain sites and represent the tribe on that matter. So the idea of a tribal commission comprised of those either representatives from the tribe that will assist the land managers will be very beneficial. Most of the time we find that even in certain situations we can develop, let's say for Bandelier, we can develop a relationship with the superintendent, but if that person leaves, sometimes there's that break in continuity, whereas hopefully something like a tribal commission would provide that interaction and that, I guess, background for the incoming staff. So those are some of the things when we look at as far as education-wise, how we can continue to develop and provide these opportunities. As I stated before, working with the Bears Ears National Monument and the Chaco Canyon Tribal Association, even with the number of effort, oftentimes our staff is overstretched and trying to make sure that we capture all the pertinent information in this small time frame is often difficult. And even with a lot of support from the other pueblos, sometimes it came down to capacity. But we did provide through the Chaco Heritage Tribal Association those supporting tribes to be able to provide technical review or at least some sort of appendix to some of the material we're gathering. So that has been, as we continue to identify areas, we want to make sure that in the planning process, there are dollars assigned so that way each tribe has the opportunity to identify TCPs or certain cultural areas, because without that on the ground or really personal interaction between our cultural leaders and the earth itself, it becomes more difficult. And as we found during COVID, COVID doesn't care, and sometimes it took some of our cultural leaders sooner than we hoped. And so while we can, we want to capture that information so that way future leaders can have these tools to help them continue to implement and provide for our really ancient ways of life. As a veteran, have testified before on behalf of Representative Grijalva, and really appreciate those opportunities to discuss co-management. But overall, we do consistently come across these funding issues. And then, of course, region to region, the staff always has a different interaction. But with, I believe, these two bills, they could provide avenues for other tribal leaders, again, to be able to allow the work to happen and really make sure our staff has a seat at the table, and without having to cut from their other duties, of course. So, but Eloko for the time, and anytime we can host you down here in Zuni again, Maya will welcome you. So Eloko.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor, and I would love to come and visit Zuni again. Yeah, thank you for sharing your experience with Bandelier. We've heard similar things from other Pueblos about the difficulty in sustaining that engagement across staff turnover, and I also hear your funding comments loud and clear. So thank you, Lieutenant Governor. It's good to see you.
And I would just add my gratitude, Lieutenant Governor, for your consistent work with us, your participation in our hearing earlier this year. So thank you, as always, for your insights and advice, and thank you for sharing your comments today. We certainly hear the interest in continuing those relationships and ensuring funding, as Maya said. So thank you again.
Likewise, Lieutenant Governor, thank you for joining us today and for offering your thoughts on these. We appreciate hearing from you. I don't see more raised hands. I'm certain that folks have more questions. Let's see, going to the chat here. Hello, Lee. MV Nixon is commenting about religious freedom and the First Amendment, as well as the UN Declaration. Critical issues there. Please discuss how within both bills, interested tribes will be identified. The identification of the proper tribes to identify tribal cultural areas, participate in the commissions, and be eligible for receiving lands under the Parity Act is critical. And the process of identification is not clear. I was checking my notes too, and I sort of had a similar question I was hoping would come up about which tribes might have a connection to the land with regard to the Parity Act as well.
I mean, I can start this and you can finish everything I forget to mention. So, I think this is a topic that we have had many hours of conversation about with the organizations and the tribal leaders that have been directly involved in creating this bill. And I don't think we've ever landed on the perfect answer. And so we would be extremely grateful for feedback from all of you on exactly this question. What we have in the bill is a definition of interested Indian tribe, which I'm not going to remember off the top of my head, but essentially says a tribe with a cultural, historical, prehistorical, there are a few more words in there, connection to an area. This, of course, is a definition that requires a lot of specificity and sort of conversation about exactly what it means to have a connection to an area. Our intention is not to have an exclusive definition. We intentionally did not make it, a tribe that has treaty rights in the area or a tribe that has an adjacent reservation. We recognize that tribes have connection to land that is far from their reservation or even far from where they have treaty rights. And we want to make sure that those connections are included and respected, in the tribes with those geographically distant connections have a same seat at the table. this is a long and rambling way of saying that this is a work in progress and we have a long legislative process ahead of us. We have a lot of opportunities to make improvements to this bill as we move through the process. And we would really appreciate feedback on this point and any suggestions that anyone has on ways to refine this process in question.
You dropped some language in the chat box here. Is this from the Parity Act?
This is from the Tribal Cultural Area System Act, but I believe we use the same definition across both bills.
I think that's right.
Yeah, and I would just, I think I hit the nail on the head once again there, kind of hit a lot of the points that, we welcome feedback. I think that, we certainly did not want to, the goal here was to be inclusive and to ensure that we are providing opportunities for all Indigenous communities that want to engage in the protection and future management of these sites to have the opportunity to do so and to have that elevated voice in the federal land management process. And so we've done our best to hit the mark there, but if we haven't, we would appreciate the feedback. I think these, as Maya said, although we are hoping to hopefully introduce these bills in the somewhat near future, the legislative process is a long one. And, part of the conversation today is just to, emphasize the fact that we want this to be an ongoing conversation and we want to continue to hear feedback as these bills move forward so that we can ensure that they meet the intent of Indigenous peoples across the country. So appreciate it.
Thanks for that. So as folks are reviewing that specific language and then taking time in everyone's spare time, right, to go and review the bill text, these are the kinds of things that if people have specific comments or feedback or proposed suggested edits, then you would like to hear that from them. Can you drop the email in the chat box that you would like comments at?
Perfect. Yeah, that's what I was about to say, is that I think we do recognize that Tribal Historic Preservation Officers, I think as Valerie said, are some of the most overworked and maybe under-recognized folks working on these issues. So we really appreciate the effort that all of you put in on a daily basis. And, I think we hesitate to ask more of your time and more of your energies, but, to the extent that you have the availability and opportunity, we do appreciate any insight that you're willing to provide on, kind of to ensure these bills meet their intended purposes. And, to that end, I've dropped an email in the chat here, which is kind of our clearinghouse for feedback on the bill. So if you, want to shoot us a note that, identifies concerns, identifies questions, has, insights into how best to address this issue, that would, or to, make updates to this bill text, that would be much appreciated. I think that that's probably the best way to receive us. For things like comments, we will do our best to, incorporate and to respond. I can't promise that you will get a direct response from us on each comment, depending on just the number of comments that we receive. It might be hard to respond to all of them, but, please be assured that we are reviewing the inbox. We are doing our best to incorporate feedback and to make edits to the bill. And to the extent that there are specific questions or changes, we're happy to address those directly. So thank you all again for your time and for being willing to work with us through this process.
Henry, it seems like we're kind of winding down here. So I would invite folks with any last questions or comments to put them in the chat box here or raise your hand. And while we are giving everyone a minute for that, I will acknowledge the comment from MV Nixon here about consultation. This is, along with funding being everything, this is the issue, right? Meaningful consultation. We'd love to see a definition of meaningful somewhere. There just isn't one. That's something that we're kind of looking to the advisory council for, but mentioning any place that we feel it might be appropriate to continue to raise awareness of that issue. Meaningful seems to mean different things to different parties, and that is an ongoing challenge. And so if there are other questions or comments, please continue to throw them in for our last few minutes here. And so I wanted to ask Maya and Henry, if you all have a specific timeline yet. And then also, besides comments and questions to the email that you dropped in the chat box here, what else you might need from us.
Yeah, so I mean, I can hop in my end, please feel free if there are additional things we need to add. You know, we are doing our best to, you know, move these bills towards introduction, and hopefully that will make it a little bit easier to, you know, find the bill text. There'll be a bill number. It'll be kind of easier to have conversations about it. And so, you know, we see introduction as that kind of next step that will allow us to, you know, further facilitate additional conversations. I think the hope would be that we'd have the opportunity to introduce these bills, you know, sometime in the next several weeks. I think that we don't have a date certain yet. I think it will depend somewhat on, you know, feedback that we hear from you all. If there's something blatant that we missed or something that we need to change, I think that might switch the timeline, although we welcome that feedback certainly. So we just, you know, our goal though is to have it introduced in the next several weeks. I think that feedback to the email is much appreciated. And then we will do our best to keep you all updated as we kind of move through the process when there are additional opportunities to weigh in, to provide feedback, to provide support. I mean, we, you know, to the extent that it's possible, we welcome letters of support from tribes, from, you know, indigenous organizations, et cetera, kind of a broad swath. I think the letters of support to demonstrate to members that this is something that is broadly supported by indigenous communities across the country is welcomed if that's of interest. But I think that, you know, we recognize that there are additional burdens, as I said, on folks' time and attention on these issues. And so, you know, we'll just do our best to keep the conversation going as we move forward and to make updates to these bills, both pre and post introduction. So again, a long and rambling way of saying that we appreciate your time and, you know, want to continue the conversation. I don't know, Maya, if there's anything beyond that.
I think that covers it. Participating today is one of the things that is most helpful to us. So thank you to all of you who asked questions and provided comments today. As I said, the legislative process, as you all know very well, is a very long one. And so we will have an opportunity for many discussions in the future about ways to make sure these bills are achieving their intended purpose and meeting the needs of tribes. So thank you for your time today, and don't hesitate to be in touch with either of our offices about this or any other issue. And we really look forward to continuing the conversation on these.
Wonderful, thank you. And I'm getting a question to me in the chat about links to the bill text, and just checking the email that I sent around about this. And I also dropped in the chat earlier a link to a summary. And I will do that again. But Henry, Maya, if either of you might have links to the full text, that would be great to share those here.
Yeah, I can hop in on that. We are in the perpetual cycle whirlpool of working through edits with our legislative council. And so we keep pecking away at those remaining questions and edits, but we hope to have final text to share with folks very soon, and we'll certainly distribute far and wide once we do that.
Okay, very good. I've got old versions that I think we sent around in February for our conference. So we will look for those new versions from you, and I will make sure to get those out to all of our contacts when we get those from you. I can understand about not wanting to have multiple versions of something out there when you're trying to move things along and risk confusion. Will there be another discussion on Thursday, May 19th? Actually, there's two topics there. So for NATHPO's purposes, we're having a Section 106 workshop webinar that's providing TIPO perspectives and pro tips on that topic at 1 o'clock Eastern on Thursday, May 19th. And then I believe around the same time frame, NCAI is hosting this, basically a part 2 of this for their audience. So I think the presentations will probably be the same. Henry and Maya, I assume that you will be fielding questions similarly.
That's great.
Very good. Any roundup questions or comments from folks? You've got the email address to send feedback as you would like on these bills. And you've heard from Henry and Maya and from the senator and from the chairman that they really want to hear from you on this to help them think of everything that needs to be considered here and make these bills all that they can be while we have this historic opportunity to get these done, I hope, and to make some real lasting change and progress on these issues. So I hope that you will be able to take a little bit more time and review the text when we're able to get that and provide your expert opinions based on your experience, as I mentioned at the beginning, being on the front lines of these issues. All righty, seeing no other questions or comments, thank everyone for taking time out of your very busy schedules to join us today for this. As I mentioned, we're really excited for these and looking forward to continuing to do what we can to help advance them and to make them all that we can be. Henry and Maya, thank you so much for your deep understanding of these issues and for your dedicated work on them and advancing these bills and everything else that you're working on there. Your as staffers, your deep understanding of the range. This is just one of so many things that you work on, and you have to have this level of understanding for all of the topics that you work on. It never ceases to amaze me. So thank you for taking the time to be here with us to address questions and comments and to incorporate them and to help try to make these things a reality. We appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Valerie, and thank you, NATHPO, and thank you everyone on the call.
Okay, thanks everyone. Have a great afternoon. Take care.
Have a great day.